Settling into the meditation posture. Finding a position for the body that we can maintain for roughly an hour. The posture of the body we choose so as to create the foundation for the posture of the mind. So first, grounding with the sensation of the body pressing against the cushion, mat, or chair. Taking that in. And allowing that to stabilize the mind. And then bringing attention to the upright axis of the spine. Letting the spine assume its full, natural, and upright length. One can imagine a thin thread gently lifting the top of the head. And then allowing the rest of the body to relax around that central axis. We can compare this to a fine cloth draped over a solid pillar. The posture is both upright and relaxed. And we bring this same posture to the mind. We cultivate a mind that is both bright and still. Relaxed, yet observant. We just chanted the 28 Buddhas' protection, which is probably an unfamiliar text for many of us. it begins with a list of the legendary 28 previous Buddhas. And the name of each Buddha is described by a single positive quality that characterized them. Whatever your thoughts are about how many Buddhas there have been, these qualities are skillful to remember, recollect. And we probably know people who have, to at least some extent, brought forth those qualities of leadership, of joy, of skill in teaching. Of integrity, of purity, of wisdom, of compassion. Recollecting these qualities brightens the mind. Gives us something to aspire towards. Faith that goodness is possible. And the protection comes from, primarily, from our own skillful actions of body, speech, and mind. And so here in meditation, we are cultivating skillful mental action. The Buddha speaks consistently about right effort as arousing energy to abandon unskillful states and cultivate skillful ones. And the most common, in order to maintain our focus on this, it's very helpful to ground the mind in an object, just as the body rests on the cushion. The mind can rest on an object. And I usually go with mindfulness of breathing. So being aware of the experience of each in and out breath, letting that be our frame of reference. being aware of how the breath impacts the mind, and the mind influences the breath. Both mind and body brighten, rise up, enliven on the in-breath, and settle, let go, release on the out-breath. And so, using our discernment, if the mind needs brightening, pay more attention to the in-breath. If it needs settling, calming, give more attention to the out-breath. And we don't need to give. The mind will think. And that's just what minds do. It's not a problem. But what we can do, maintaining this awareness of in and out breathing, we can also maintain the intention to direct those thoughts in the direction of goodwill. So we can practice like this for the next 10 minutes. continuing this theme of breathing with goodwill. Be aware of whether the mind has wandered off the breath, if we've lost that frame of reference. And if so, bring it back, reestablish. If the mind has maintained awareness of in and out breathing, we can be aware of that too. In this exercise, we're not trying to absorb into the breath, making it a single object of concentration, but rather to use the experience of the breathing to modulate our experience of thinking, our experience of the body, our experience of emotion. My own experience is that when I'm aware of in and out breathing, my thoughts take on a rather different quality. They're measured, more distinct, less compelling. There's more space. It's much easier to steer. And so just being aware of the thoughts, whether they're imbued with goodwill or not. And if they're not, then investigating what perspective could bring that to the situation. We're not trying to force goodwill, to try to pretend that we're not thinking about whatever has caught the mind's attention, but rather investigating what would be a perspective imbued with goodwill. And if goodwill is established, bringing awareness to the effect that this has on the body and mind. So we can practice like this for another 10 minutes. Again, checking in. Are we aware of the breath? Are the thoughts imbued with goodwill? This combination of awareness of the body through the experience of breathing and maintaining thoughts imbued with goodwill is a very powerful protection against pretty much everything. Whatever you experience, if you experience it in that framework, it will be much better, whether positive or negative. So, meditation is practice. We have the ability to learn to cultivate the skills that will let us deal skillfully with whatever comes up for us in life. If we can do that, we can maintain our own composure and well-being and be a refuge for others. So as we draw to the close of this meditation, we can once again recollect thoughts of goodwill towards whatever situations have arisen in our minds over the past half hour. And also just recognizing that this is a pleasant abiding here and now. And recollecting that spending our time this way is time well spent. It will serve us well in the future. And we can consciously spread thoughts of goodwill to whoever is on our minds. May they be happy. May they be at peace. May they undertake skillful action. May they be truly well.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So far this evening, we've, all of us have come together, and this is a communal activity. This is using communal activity, community, as a spiritual practice. Coming together, like-minded people leaning towards peace, leaning towards kindness, leaning towards understanding, and. So we've come together, and there's about 30 of us living here who are at the moment, and so about 20 or so monastics and a team of about 10 lay people. And then, as I mentioned earlier, coming to the hall, just really delighted to see so many people coming from outside the monastery, just dipping in, tapping in to what's going on here, using the opportunities that exist here. And that's something I've been emphasizing a lot lately when in positions of sharing, but also in my own day-to-day life, is using opportunities, the opportunities that arise, and really developing the discernment to know what's a wholesome opportunity and what's an unwholesome opportunity, and to cultivate the wholesome ones and leave aside the unwholesome ones. Shy away from that, step away from that, don't get involved. And I think early in the evening, Ajahn Kachana, used the word cultivating. I find a very useful word in terms of developing wholesomeness and using wholesomeness in our life. Cultivating the practices which will lead us and allow us to realize peace. So using opportunities, and cultivation. So this evening we did the communal activity of chanting together, and for a lot of us, we're not maybe familiar with chanting the Pali scriptural language, and as was pointed out, we chanted a chant that we don't do that often. We haven't been doing it so often here. It's actually a very well-known chant, but we don't happen to do it so often. But we did it this evening, and we really rarely. Matter of fact, this might be the first time we've done it on an evening when it's been the guided meditation. And so, working together unfamiliarly, it's in an unfamiliar way. And so, listening to each other, listening to the words, focusing, it brings our mind, it collects our mind in a good way, and using our voices collectively, listening. So, and then afterwards, listening to guided meditation, and using that guidance, then the way Ajahn Kachana then says, okay, we'll practice like this for 10 minutes. So to apply his guidance, his suggestions, and taking us deeper and deeper, probably possibly into meditation. So developing ways of seeing the mind and the heart. So using these tools, so the tools of community, the tools of meditation, to lead us, once again, to use this phrase I've already used twice, I believe, this evening, of leading us towards peace, towards understanding, towards wisdom and discernment. So, and then the precepts, and so whether we participated in them or not, this evening, but we're witnessing, even if we were just listening, and just witnessing on, okay, right, precepts. So, and this is a very, using the precepts, these are not edicts from an outside force, as you heard in the English translation. Each time it was, I undertake the precept to refrain from. So, me, I am picking this up to refrain from. It's sort of no, don't do this, or if you do this, you're gonna go to hell or something. I don't know, something will happen to you. It's a very mature you requesting, like the request that was made in the Pali scripture language was 3 times you have to ask to take these on, and so and otherwise none of us can offer these precepts. Like I can't, if the request doesn't come in, we don't do it, because you're asking, not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. Venerable Sir, would you please do this? So it's a mature, and then that I undertake this precept to refrain from. I undertake the precept. You got to go through all the different 8, and so it's working with these things. It's a framework. You can refer to them as rules or whatever. But it's a framework that gives us shape now to our ethical conduct, and then with the 8 precepts, it also gives shape, as I mentioned, in terms of renunciation. Because I found both intellectually understanding, but also through my own experience, is that when there's refraining from things which are wholesome but more pleasure-based, right? Is that when I bump up against that, because as monks and nuns especially, we've got hundreds of rules. There's a lot of things, don't do this, can't do that, can't do that. So every day, at least in my own experience, you bump up against some sort of, it frustrates desire. It frustrates desire, and you think, well, whoa, why would you want to do that? But as the Buddha pointed out, is that you'll never get to the end of desire by following desire. If you're just constantly feeding desire and quenching desire by getting what we want, you won't get to the end of it. So these are not words to be believed, and in the spirit of the Buddha himself and his teachings, these are for reflection. To actually consider that, well, is that really the way it works, and to investigate in our own life. So living within a framework, and it doesn't necessarily mean we live in a monastery or have to live by the hundreds of precepts that a nun or a monk pick up, but we can actually use certain aspects of our life. Well, do I have to get what I want to be happy? Because that's what we're taught, isn't it? Like, at least the way I see it, right from when we're old enough to understand what people are saying, get what you want, and we, people hopefully will be encouraging us to get what we want that's wholesome things and legal, hopefully legal, okay? It wasn't always the case in my childhood. I had friends that, had very interesting parents sometimes. Giving them their weekly ration of marijuana. I grew up in California in the 1960s, so it was interesting times. But is just getting what we want, and so putting ourselves intentionally picking up or creating structures in our life, not complicated, but or just working with that, and through meditation. Using meditative tools to actually see desire, to actually understand what's a wholesome desire and an unwholesome desire, because there is a difference, and it is not a small difference. It makes every bit of difference, because sometimes desire can be used in certain circles in a pejorative, negative sense, but there is as many unwholesome desires there are wholesome desires, I would venture to say. And so in our scriptural language, that we actually have two words that we use for desire. One is tanha, which means either craving or like thirsting after something, like craving. And then chanda, it can be used either way, but typically it's used as a positive chanda. In fact, even there's nuns and monks named like Chandika or Chandako, one with chanda, because it's the wholesome desire, desire for wholesome things, desire for the well-being of ourselves and others, desire to help people, desire to act in good ways and to be useful in life, to actually use this incredibly precious human life for good. Doesn't have to be grand, but just wholesomeness. So, but we need to be able to discern between the two, and so that's one of the just one small aspect of developing meditative skills is to be able to see, to discern what's what. By doing exercises that give us the opportunity for the mind to settle, for the heart to settle. So this is whether we're a monk or a nun or a layperson, whatever, so wherever we're living, is it to be able to, as things settle, then more clearly we can hopefully see things. And so today after the meal I met people who had come at mealtime. I tried to go up and receive them, speak with them, and we were, talking about this. And because if we don't see what our inner world is actually doing, because that's where we suffer. That's where this. We feel bodily pain, right? That comes. That's just part of being a human being. If we're born, any living being is going to feel discomfort and physical pain. Why do we shift positions? Why do we have to change our posture? Why do we roll over when we sleep? Why do we do any of those things? Because we're uncomfortable. This is part of being a human being or a living being. So discomfort is one thing, but suffering, that non-acceptance, that sort of mental anguish, and even if it's subtle, that I need to get rid of this before I'm okay-ness. Right? It's that where we're dwelling in that, I got to get rid of this, I got to get away from this, instead of can we change posture without suffering? Can we experience that physical discomfort without, why is he talking for so long? Can't I just go back to my hut? Or can't I just get back to meditating? All this talking and this guided meditation, and I just want to sit quietly. That's suffering. That's the non-acceptance. Now, can we actually think those? Can we say, well, actually, I'm not finding this pleasant. Full stop. And be at peace with not having things the way we want them. And so, working with desire is a great tool to recognize when we want something to be other than the way it is. Right? So the wish for something means we probably don't have it yet. Right? We want something because we don't have it. So, and it might be something really good. Right? It might be something it's totally legal. Nobody's going to get hurt. But if we're basing our well-being on getting that desired object, whether it's a thing or a relationship or a job or an identity or an education or whatever, if we're basing our well-being on acquiring that, we need to really look at that. Right? Now, I'm not talking about, okay, I would really like to get that doctor's appointment because something's going on seriously, or I need to get this treated. No, this is not what I'm talking about. This is where we need to really be able to see clearly around what's a wholesome, appropriate, is another word I'll add, appropriate desire. The other question to ask, is it self-centered? Is it a self-centered desire? So I was speaking about that earlier this evening with somebody. Is it what I'm involving myself in, what I'm wishing for, what I'm wanting to get, is it self-centered? Is it wholesome? Is it self-centered? Is it beneficial for me, beneficial for others? Or is it only going to be beneficial for me? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it fits into all the other categories, and it's okay. But if we don't see what we're doing, if we don't see what we're doing in our mind, and just putting on robes and taking on, shaving our head and taking on hundreds of precepts, it doesn't mean that these impulses disappear. It's through practice, discernment. This is, where we develop. Now, living in this particular form, because of the refinement of it, it does give us because a lot of, as I was saying earlier, we bump up a lot of things, through our day. You can't do this, as I was saying, can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. So it's that, the phrase I used about 20 minutes ago was that frustrating desire. And so by seeing desire, by not being able to wallpaper over it, by just going to the refrigerator, because, especially as fully ordained monks, we can't go into the kitchen and just get what we want. Everything we consume, except for water, everything has to be offered by a layperson, right? And so even if somebody were to offer us lots of food this morning at 12 noon, we have to let it go. And then have faith that, hopefully the next day food will be offered. By the way, it is. We have very good support here. So it's that, not being able to do, not being able to do certain things. And so that impulse, right? So even the most senior monk, it should inform another monk when they're leaving the monastery, if it's afternoon. Even the most senior monk should say, "Oh, by the way, I'm going into town. I've got a doctor's appointment, or I'm going such and such a place." Not just if we're going out for a walk, just to get some exercise, but if we're actually going into the town. So you might think, wow, the man's 75 years old, and he has to inform somebody that he's going out to an eye doctor's appointment. But that's the way our Vinaya works. That's the way our training precepts work. And then, so to that informing, that openness and everything. Now, I'm not suggesting that people living in lay life should do that. No way, because these are very, very refined training precepts. But just to give you background for instance, also why we're living the way we live, and why so many rules, and so many of them, most of them are incredibly mundane. All of what was recited this evening, the 8 precepts, contains all the ethical precepts. We have some refinements to those, but it contains all the things that if we do them, that it's considered unethical within a framework of being a human being. So what I'm emphasizing, what we're trying to emphasize, is that that spiritual practice, the way it's in our tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, it's not just about meditation. If we can do all the meditation we want, but if we're not also cultivating those other aspects of life, really planting the seeds for the mind and heart to be able to calm down. Because I know if I do something unskillful, or if I have speak to somebody unskillfully, or if I've got regrets and the echoes of unskillfulness rumbling around my heart and mind, so my emotional world and my intellectual world, wow, when you sit down to meditate, and you're trying to cultivate, these qualities, some of which I've been reflecting on tonight, well, what's going to be rumbling around our consciousness? Regret, remorse. Now, it's good to feel regret. That means that we have some sense of decorum, some sense of right and wrong. But those are quite difficult heart states and mind states to be working with, and we're not going to. The more clear we are, the more things settled, the less regret and remorse. Then the more refined things will reveal themselves. The more refined. So I use this analogy far too often, but for those of you who have been here in the daylight, there's a pond out here, And when the water is clear, like when it's not stirred up, then you can see through to the bottom. You can see if there's any living beings, any newts or fish or frogs. You can see that. You can see if there's any plants growing up from the bottom. But like today, there was about 3 or 4 ducks had landed on the little pond. And they were kind of flapping around and swimming around, and it stirred up the water. So you're not going to be able to see clearly, because things got stirred up. Okay, now I'm not giving any ethical quality to ducks, by the way. They're just ducks. And so, but they stirred up the water, and so that analogy of not being able to see clearly when things are stirred up. So it doesn't mean that we need to live like we're walking on eggs, but if we develop good habits around our lifestyle, around how we're living, how we're relating to the world around us, the things around us, the people around us, the environment. And so then living without regret, without remorse, and also it gives a feeling of uplift. You know, when we can put our head down on our pillow at night and not have regret or remorse. This is, you know, it's a real gift to ourselves and others. It's a gift of fearlessness to others. People don't need to be afraid of having contact with us or you know, being avoiding us, and we don't need to avoid ourselves. You know, because sometimes, you know, in my own experience, you know, if I've acted unskillfully, I mean, I didn't become a monk till I was 42, and I didn't pick up precepts until I was 32, and so I had several years of some not very wholesome activity, and yeah, it's confusing, it's painful, you know, it creates worry, it creates an anxiety, and once we start to adjust our habits, you know, create new habits of skillfulness, peace comes. So it's like, you know, this is, I think, quite wonderful that the world is, most of the world is familiar with like mindfulness-based practices. You know, you hear about mindfulness so much. You know, it's in the news. You hear about all these courses. You see them advertised on the internet and all over the place. This is good. People are becoming familiar with practices. But as one of my teachers pointed out, you know, if you want to reduce sorry, I'll just backtrack. So there's like, for instance, mindfulness-based stress reduction. Okay, good. Now, as one of my teachers pointed out, and it quite resonated with my own experience, is that if you want to reduce stress, if we live in ways where we don't have regret or fear of getting caught, you know, because we've done something unwholesome, or that will reduce our stress right away. I mean, you can just by, for instance, living on the 5 precepts, which were basically the same as what was done tonight, except without the renunciation. So instead of celibacy, it's just to refrain from sexual misconduct. And so, you know, just by living with the 5 precepts, it's a profound shift. And so, in terms of, all right, you know, you're dropping the reducing our fear, you know. Because I remember, you know, when I was young and when I would do unwholesome things, a lot of times I was just afraid of getting busted. You know, either busted by my parents or busted by the cops. And so, you know, just that simple, it might sound oversimplistic, but, you know, by not lying, by not cheating on people, by not, speaking incorrectly, all of those things, we don't need to feel afraid. And this is actually a very powerful shift. You know, it's a really powerful shift. So it's not about trying to be some goody-goody, sort of angelic being or anything like that. It's about actually, good karma. This is really, you know, karma in our tradition means action. And by extension, the results of good action is always good. Even if eventually, like maybe sometimes people say, yeah, well, I did this really good thing and people completely misunderstood me and they were criticizing me. Well, it was still a good action. Now maybe somebody misunderstood, right? But it was still a good action. And so good action can only have a good result. And similarly, a negative karma, unwholesome karma, can only have a negative result. And you might say, well, yeah, that person, I know they're doing that, and they're getting all this good stuff happen to them. But are they living with a clear mind? Are they living with a clear heart? Right? Or are they living in fear? Like, I may have been getting what I wanted as a kid, doing some really naughty things, but I wasn't comfortable. Like I said, I thought I was going to get caught. So these are really basic examples, but I think to really understand that actually it's a pretty basic teaching. It doesn't need to be complicated, and so to really combine meditation with the precepts, and then obviously the monastic community, really okay, because usually we're the only person who knows that we've broken a precept. So, for instance, this morning, as we do every full moon and new moon, the recitation of the monastic code. So one person recites it, one person checks it, and then also the novices, anagarkas, the nun, they have their ceremonies around reestablishing their precepts. And so before the monks and nuns do their ceremony, they confess any rules that they've broken to another. So the nun would confess to another nun, and the monks would confess to another monk. And so we confess if we remember breaking any precepts. And the reason we confess is that, generally speaking, we're the only person who knows that we broke it. So then I remember somebody saying that to me, why do you tell anybody if nobody knows? Well, I think we can all reflect on that and why would I do that? That very revealing, that openness, that sort of saying, oh, this is something that I did, it was breaking a rule, and there's a sort of back and forth chanting, and do you see your fault? Yes, Venerable Sir, I see my fault. Okay, try harder next time, strive harder next time to not do that. And so it's that openness, the recognizing, oh yeah, right, this is a training. This is a training, there's no punishment. And so, to train the heart, and so that we can really use these precepts to develop, well, all sorts of qualities. Now, in the lay community, obviously, that form isn't there. It's very different. But just as one of my teachers refers to, he likens the precepts to a bit like having speed bumps. Right? They tell you when you're going too fast. Right? And I quite like that image, because if we don't have some sort of boundary, we can really stray pretty far. Like without those speed bumps, we can get going pretty fast down those side streets, right? And usually the speed bumps are put in a residential neighborhood or near a school or something like that, because we need to, we need to tell people, slow down. You need to be slow here. And so our speed bumps are the precepts, and so if we're aware of what we're doing, and then we go, oh right, oh yeah, maybe what I said wasn't quite true or quite honest, right? Maybe that wasn't quite, or maybe my taking that wasn't, maybe I was taking more than actually I was supposed to take, or I know that when I was working, how many people had things from the office at home. How many pens had you just borrowed from the office, or things like that. And so these are refinements, but by having these speed bumps, and so for the lay community, this is an encouragement. If we maybe experiment with living with the 5 precepts of not killing, not stealing, not being disloyal in relationships, not using harsh or false speech, and then refraining from intoxicants. And so just experiment with that and see what the results are, right? So it's, remember, picking them up intentionally and do that. And then, here again, for the monastic community, to really, because we have other things as well within the community here. We have what are called community standards, rules that weren't laid down by the Buddha, weren't developed by the Buddha, but they're in like the house rules. And so, can we? And it's actually a practice. So, in the I think in the Thai language, and we do have 2 Thai monks here. Is it Korwat Patipat? Is that right? So it's practicing with the house rules. Here's one translation. And so you think, oh well, and they're really minor. They're really nitty gritty. Like, don't leave the bar of soap sitting in a soap dish full of water. Like really, really mundane stuff. Don't leave your personal belongings in the communal bathroom. And they're really mundane, and it's just so that we can actually live here and not have, just walk into messy rooms and, with 30 people living here. Not to walk around outside with bare feet and then not wash your feet going into a building. It's really, really super basic stuff. But because they're so basic and mundane, it'd be easy to just say, the Buddha didn't lay down these rules. I'm not going to follow these. Well, this is not utilizing that opportunity for the Korwat Patipat, or practicing with the house rules. And so even people living here as guests, so for instance, because a lot of this stuff applies to the guests as well, when it comes up. And so to work with, all right, because every time we let go of following our desire, that's a moment, and it's an overused but beautiful phrase, letting go. There's a release. There's a little mini sacrifice. There's this lovely word here again in the Thai language, sia sala, like this sacrifice or relinquishment, a relinquishment of desire, a relinquishment, a letting go, and to go beyond. So it's a particular way of training. But even, using, like here again for the lay community, even for a day and a night, to be, experimenting with the 8 precepts. Well, can I go? I mean, the first time I was going to go without dinner, I was like, what? I remember I was at the monastery, I arrived in the morning. It was the first day, I was going to just have the meal in the morning, breakfast and lunch. And I got 2 plates of food. And I completely overate. Spent the next 6 hours kind of, feeling really, really not well. And then there was no dinner. And that was a relief, because I'd overstuffed myself at the meal. And that's not the way to do it, by the way. Not recommended. And so, it's like, to experiment with these things. And just say, well, what is the effect? So my mind was telling me where I was suffering over the food was in my mind, basically, until I put 2 plates of food in my stomach. If I'd just worked with the fear of not having dinner, it was a fear of being hungry. The next morning I would have had food. Well, I did have food. But, and then we can investigate fear. Or, can I actually go without, entertainment for a day? So the 7th precept, entertainment, beautification, and adornment. Can I go without looking at YouTube for a day, or looking at the television, or listening to music for a day? And what does that thought bring up? Right? Might bring up nothing. You might say, "Great, what a relief." Or you might say, "What? Not pick up my phone for a day?" Right? So it's just to investigate. It's nothing wrong with picking up your phone, but just to use renunciant precepts to investigate desire. So as I was saying earlier in this reflection, that we'll never get to the end of desire by just feeding desire, by fulfilling our desires. by relieving our desire by getting what we want. It's not the way. And so, obviously, some of this that I'm reflecting on tonight is really refined. But I just thought, since we have had meditation and the precepts this evening, to just reflect a little bit, at least touch a little bit on how they fold into each other. Is that one supports the other? And one of the images that's used is, like two wheat sheaves leaning up against each other will hold each other up. So they without one, if you take away one, the other one falls over. If you only have meditation, it's often said, if you only cultivating meditation without actually looking at how we live our life and living life in a way that supports meditation, like the precepts, using that as a guideline, for instance, that supports our meditation. And then the meditation also, vice versa, it supports our precepts because the meditation helps us be aware of our impulses and the way our mind and heart works. So that one supports the other. So this is not saying that we, as I said, not trying to just become really good at being rule keepers or anything like that. That's not what it's about. It's this mature use of guidelines in our life that will help support us, so that we actually we have more of an opportunity to develop the wisdom and discernment to really crack through the things that lead to suffering. Because as the Buddha himself says, there's suffering and the end of suffering. There's this dukkha and the end of dukkha. And it is possible. And so whether we're, a nun or a monk, a novice, an agarika, a layman, laywoman, the dynamic is the same, that suffering is caused by some sort of desire. Lifestyle that's not it, right? So using the opportunity to see suffering, to see the cause of suffering, and to learn how to let go of that cause, to see through and let go of the things that are causing us discomfort, unsatisfactoriness, that sense of lack, that sense of being ill at ease. So, well, that was longer than I thought it was going to be. Sorry, folks. So, evening is going on a bit long. But as I mentioned earlier, what we'll do now, in a few moments, we'll be closing, after the talk, we'll be closing the live stream. And people are very welcome to stay on as long as they wish to practice meditation. So sitting in the hall is either sitting meditation or standing meditation. But if you wish to do walking meditation, that could be elsewhere. And it's quite a mild night, and we've got the walkways and the grass and things. And if we can just all come and go from the hall as quietly as possible. And just at midnight, we'll close with a chant, just about 5 minutes of chanting. And so the driveway will be, because we have bollards that block off the driveway at night, the driveway will be open until about 15 minutes after midnight. So if anybody is staying who's come in a car, just so you know, you're not trapped in here unless you stay beyond 12:15. And okay, that's enough.